Devarshi Narad performed his destined task. He has steeled Savitri's will, and incidentally he has also enlightened us on a number of questions such as what is fate, why is there pain, how did evil come about, how was the universe created, and so on. Savitri presumably returns to Satyavan's hermitage and they begin to live together. And that 1 year is described in Canto 1. The joy of union, the ordeal of the foreknowledge of death, and the heart's grief and pain. This is what this canto describes in some detail. But even at the very beginning, you have a few glorious lines which summarize, after a fashion, Sri Aurobindo's views on fate. What is fate? How does fate work? He begins this canto by saying, fate followed her foreseen immutable road. I'll just draw your attention to this passage without dwelling on it at any length. He says, man's hopes and longings build the journeying wheels that bear the body of his destiny. Our destiny is born, as it were, on a chariot or in a vehicle of which our hopes and desires are the wheels. So that is the vehicle that our destiny rides. This vehicle has wheels which are made up of our desires and our longings and lead his blind will towards an unknown goal. And these wheels of desire and longing lead this chariot or this vehicle to an unknown goal because the will seems to be blind. His fate within him shapes his acts and rules. Its face and form already are born in him. Already are born with him what may be called his karma, his destiny, where he is supposed to go, the grooves along which these wheels will roll. Its parentage is in a secret soul. Here matter seems to mold the body's life and the soul follows where the nature drives. So it looks as if, when you look on the surface, that we are driven blindly along the grooves of our karma, and our past karma determines our present desires and longings. So it looks as if everything is predetermined, and what determines these things are our outward acts. Here matter seems to mold the body's life and the soul follows where its nature drives. It looks as if soul has no choice, soul blindly follows where body, your desires, your longings pull us, drag it. Nature and fate compel his free will's choice. That's what it looks like. Man's own nature and man's fate seem to be the arbiters. But Sri Aurobindo points out, but greater spirits this balance can reverse. We are bound by karma. We are bound by what we have accumulated. As long as we live under the control, guidance of the ego, there is no escape as long as we are in the realm of the ego. Greater spirits who can rise above the ego come under the domain of another force. Only those people can reject their karma, can rise above their karma. So he says, But greater spirits, this balance can reverse and make the soul the artist of its fate. The soul calls the shots. You can make this, you can enjoy what is called free will, not within the domain of the ego. Ego is nature bound. Ego is a nature's product. It's produced by nature, and therefore it will be nature's product. And therefore, as long as you are within the realm of the ego, you have no free will. What you think is free will is already predetermined by your personality, which has been formed by the samskaras that you have already inherited from your past birth, and the surroundings which have molded your life and so on. So you don't seem to have anything of your own. Everything seems to be a function of your past or function of your early upbringing. But this can be rejected. You can really exercise your freedom only when he says, this is the mystic truth our ignorance hides. Doom is a passage for our inborn force. Our ordeal is the hidden spirit's choice. Ananke is our being's own decree. Ananke is the Greek notion of fate. The fate basically is our being's own decree. It is the fate that ultimately determines what our future is going to be. So it's not we are led blindly by karma. The ultimate power is within our soul. And also there is a notion of grace. When the grace comes, the grace can also cancel the past karma. So there is this grace, and there is also the soul's will. This is basically Sri Aurobindo's position to the question, is there free will or is everything determined? His answer would be, it all depends. The answer is not either yes or no, it is yes and no. As long as you are, as we have been saying, within the bounds of nature, of ego, you have no free will. You may feel it is your free will that you are exercising, but you are just a puppet that your nature makes you dance up and down, and so you find that dancing happy, pleasant, and you think it is your free will. It is not your free will. Only free will can come when you have risen above this. Ultimately, the free will belongs to our inner being. Now notice, this is just a beginning. He didn't have to say all this. He is now introducing us, Savitri's going back to the forest and spending one whole year with Satyavan. That was the topic. But just in the beginning, he has kind of thrown in this kind of summary statement which beautifully presents his viewpoint in a very, very about 10, 12 lines. As I said, this is basically describes her first year. Let us read a little bit. Page 468, where the new section begins. At first, to her beneath these sapphire heavens, the sylvan solitude was a gorgeous dream. Savitri, having met the man of her choice, has gone back and spending her days and her nights in the company of Satyavan. So therefore he says, at first, in the beginning, to her beneath these sapphire heavens, the sylvan solitude was a gorgeous dream. The solitude that the forest afforded, naturally in the forest, you are all alone. It looked like a gorgeous dream, an altar of the summer splendor and fire, a sky-topped flower-hung palace of the gods, and all its scenes a smile on rapture's lips. Life there looked like you understand rapture. Suppose rapture were to have a face and rapture were to smile, how would that smile look? So, the year there looked like a smile on the face of rapture. and all it seems a smile on lips, and all its voices bards of happiness. All the voices in the forest, the streams flowing, the birds chirping, the wind blowing, all this for her, voices bards of happiness. They all sang, they were poets of happiness. There was a chanting in the casual wind. There was a glory in the least sunbeam. Even in the casual sunbeam, he said, there was a chanting in the casual wind. Even when the wind blew, it sounded as if it brought along with it a chant. There was a chanting in the casual wind. There was a glory in the least sunbeam. Night was a chrysoprase on velvet cloth, a nestling darkness or a moonlit deep. Day was a purple pageant and a hymn, a wave of the laughter of light from morn to eve. His absence was a dream of memory. When Satyavan was not in her immediate vicinity, it was like a dream of memory. His presence was the empire of a god. When Satyavan was with her, it looked like an empire of a god. A fusing of joys of earth and heaven. This was a fusing of the joys of earth and heaven. A tremulous blaze of nuptial rapture past. A rushing of two spirits to be one. A burning of two bodies in one flame. Opened were gates of unforgettable bliss. Two lives were locked within an earthly heaven, and fate and grief fled from that fiery hour. But soon failed the summer's ardent breath, and throngs of blue-black clouds crept through the sky. Remember when Satyavan and Savitri met, I remember he describes as if it was a time where spring and summer were locked arm in arm and didn't know whether it is springtime or summer. Soon after that, Savitri went back and she is back now. The summer is now gone and comes the rainy season, monsoons. But soon now failed the summer's ardent breath, and throngs of blue-black clouds crept through the sky, and rain fled sobbing over the dripping leaves, and storm became the forest's titan voice. Then listening to the thunder's fatal crash, and the fugitive pattering footsteps of the showers, and the long unsatisfied panting of the wind, and sorrow muttering in the sound-vexed night, the grief of all the world came near to her. At night, when it rained, and he describes the howling storm, the rain pattering on the roof, the wind howling, at that time, Savitri still lay awake in bed. Satyavan probably was fast asleep because he didn't know that he had this calamity round the corner. Only Savitri knew. Nobody knew. Neither Satyavan nor Satyavan's parents knew that Satyavan was destined to die in a short period of time. Only Savitri knew this, and therefore Savitri can't just go into sleep, so she is tossing around restlessly on her bed, and therefore he says at that time, night's darkness seemed her future's ominous face. So the darkness all around her looked like her future. Her future's face was as dark as that dark night. The shadow of her lover's doom arose, and fear laid hands upon her mortal heart. The moment swift and ruthless raced, alarmed, her thoughts, her mind remembered Narad's date. Her thought and her mind remember what Narad had said, Narad's date. A trembling moved accountant of her riches. She reckoned the insufficient days between. A dire expectancy knocked at her breast. Dreadful to her were the footsteps of the hours. Every passing hour for her brought that time, that moment, that much closer. So the time's footsteps were dreadful to her. Grief came, a passionate stranger to her gate. Until now, Savitri knew no grief. So, grief in fact was a stranger. So, grief came, a passionate stranger to her gate, banished when in his arms. And when Savitri found herself in the arms of Satyavan, there was no grief. Grief was banished. Banished when in his arms, out of her sleep, it rose at morn to look into her face. So when she woke up the next morning, the first thought that confronted her is this, that Satyavana was going to die in a few months' time. So he says, when she was with Satyavan, that the thought of grief just disappeared, there was no grief. But when she was all alone, when she woke up the next morning, the first thought that confronted her was this. It rose at morn to look into her face. Vainly she fled into abysms of bliss from her pursuing foresight of the end. The more she plunged into love, that anguish grew. Her deepest grief from sweetest gulfs arose. Remembrance was a poignant pang. She felt each day a golden leaf torn cruelly out from her too slender book of love and joy. See, he says, her book of love and joy was very slender. It has very few pages left. And each day passed was like tearing off a page from that book. So she felt as each day was passed, a page was torn off that book, which had already become very slender. Each day a golden leaf torn cruelly out from her too slender book of love and joy, thus swaying in strong gusts of happiness and swimming in foreboding somber waves and feeding sorrow and terror with her heart. For now they sat among her bosom's guests, or in her inner chamber paced apart. Her eyes stared blind into the future's night. This is just, I thought I should read these few lines to give you a sample, an idea of how Sri Aurobindo describes this, a very tense year. In one sense, it is the fulfillment of a life. In another sense, each moment of fulfillment brings her that much closer to the dreaded hour of Satyavan's death. This is the whole canto. We go on now to Canto 2. Now, as Savitri is going through this experience, as you know, in the original Mahabharata story, Savitri is supposed to have performed a vow, what is called a Tri-Ratra vow, which is 3 nights and 3 days, a very strict austerity, standing in one place, not eating, not drinking, and she had to stand in one place and meditate. This is supposed to be a very strict, very difficult vratam, and the original story says Satyavan's father, Dyumatsena, tried to dissuade her, said, you shouldn't undergo all such hardship, it is not necessary. But Savitri said, no, I would like to feel pure from inside. So she didn't tell them exactly why she was undergoing this hardship. That is the original story. Now Sri Aurobindo uses that as here Savitri's yoga. Now we begin, Savitri's yoga begins. Now in the beginning, as you have in the Gita, Arjun's Vishada yoga, that itself is a yoga. Not all Vishada, not all crises can lead to this kind of a inner tension. So Gita describes the first canto when Arjun looks at the two armies, the Kauravas and the Pandavas, and is overcome with this tremendous feeling that why should he kill his own elders, his own gurus, his own dear ones, just for the sake of a kingdom? I would rather be a sannyasi. I would rather give up everything than kill my own people. And so saying, when he says this, his entire body begins to shake and his bow and arrow, everything slip off and so on. That is described as Arjun's Vishada Yoga. Savitri also goes through a similar stage in the beginning. In the beginning she says, how can anybody vanquish death? And she says here, why camest thou, page 474, when she was sitting at night, thinking to herself, meditating, around her body stillness all grew still. Middle of that page. Her heart listened to its slow measured beats. Her mind renouncing thought heard and was mute. Why camest thou to this dumb death-bound earth, this ignorant life beneath indifferent skies, tied like a sacrifice on the altar of time? O spirit, O immortal energy, if it was to nurse grief in a helpless heart, or with hard, tearless eyes await thy doom, arise, O soul, and vanquish time and death. Something within her says, arise, Savitri, don't just sit quietly moping and worrying about the future. Arise, this is the time for you to realize your full potential. Arise to the fullest stature of her inner being and vanquish death. Something within her says this. But like Arjun, in Vishada Yoga you have here, but Savitri's heart replied in the dim night, my strength is taken from me and given to death. Why should I lift my hands to the shut heavens, or struggle with mute inevitable fate, or hope in vain to uplift an ignorant race who hug their lot and mock the Saviour light, and see in mind wisdom's sole tabernacle? Why should I do anything? Because she had not come for herself. Why should I do anything at all? Why should I raise my protest against a fate that man has so willingly accepted? Man has made a compromise with death and ignorance and is quite happy to be what he is. And he says, why should I in vain try to uplift an ignorant race who hug their lot and mock the Saviour light, and see in mind as we are now, we see the highest point, the highest temple, the most sacred temple. That's what our mind is. In its harsh peak and its inconscient base, a rock of safety and an anchor of sleep. Is there a God whom any cry can move? He sits in peace and leaves the mortal strength impotent against his calm, omnipotent law and in conscience and the almighty hands of death. What need have I? What need has Satyavan to avoid the black mesh net, the dismal door, or call a mightier light into life's closed room, a greater law into man's little world? Well, I and Satyavan came from some other region. We have had some time here. 1 year we are living together. He is destined to die. I know how to follow him, so I will follow him. That's about all. We will forever be united there wherever we came from. Why should I be here? Why should I struggle against death? For whom should I do it? Man doesn't seem to be particularly unhappy with the present lot. That's what she says. Why should I strive with earth's unyielding loss, or stave off death's inevitable hour? This surely is best, to pack ties with my fate and follow close behind my lover's steps. I will make a pact with my fate. When Satyavan dies, I also will give up my life. So what is the big thing about it? Like Arjun saying, Who wants to fight this war? I will take sannyas, wander in the forest. So she says, why should I fight? Refuses to fight. Savitri refuses to fight like Arjun refuses to fight. This surely is best to pack ties with my fate and follow close behind my lover's steps and pass through night from twilight to the sun across the tenebrous river that divides the adjoining parishes of earth and heaven. There will be this river called Vaitarini which separates earth from heaven. So I will cross this river over and go to the other side, and in heaven I will be united with Satyavan. Then could we lie enarmed, breast upon breast, untroubled by thought, untroubled by our hearts, forgetting man and life and time and its hours, forgetting eternity's call, forgetting God. We don't even bother why God created this world. It is too messy for anybody to concern himself. The best thing is to escape from this world. We made a mistake in coming to this world. There is a tax we have to pay for coming here, which is ignorance and death. Satyavan has to pay it very soon. I will also pay it prematurely and retire. We will both go back to heaven and lie together forever and ever, forgetting the world, forgetting God. We have nothing to do with this. The voice replied, something in from Savitri now replies, is this enough, O spirit? And what shall thy soul say when it wakes and knows that the work was left undone for which it came? Then why did you come here if you want to go back like this? When you realize who you are, then you will suddenly find the purpose for which you had come down here on earth has remained has unfulfilled. The work was left undone for which it came, or is this all for thy being born on earth, charged with a mandate from eternity, a listener to the voices of the years, a follower of the footprints of the gods, to pass and leave unchanged the old dusty laws? Are you just putting your signature and saying all these old dusty laws that nature has created, ignorance has created, they are okay? Are you going to pass them and go on? No greater light come down upon the earth, delivering her from her unconsciousness, man's spirit from unalterable fate? Camest thou not down to open the doors of fate, the iron doors that seemed forever closed, and lead man to truth's wide and golden road that runs through finite things to eternity? Is this not why you came here? And because the going is tough, you just want to abandon everything and go back? Is this then the report that I must make, my head bowed with shame before the eternal seat? His power he kindled in thy body has failed. His laborer returns, her task undone. This is the final report. The avatar was sent down to earth and found the task too formidable, and therefore came back the way she went, with empty hands. Mission failed before it began. Is that what we should say? This is what the Spirit is asking her. And this is a question that we must ask ourselves. We left the paradise of Satchidananda. We took a plunge here into matter. We accepted ignorance. We accepted death. We have been evolving the last billions and billions of years. We have now come at a midpoint. Shall we now abandon this entire thing as it is and go back to nirvana and moksha. And God will say, you spent considerable time down there on earth. I'm sure you have fulfilled the task. No, sir, I found the last 2 stages very difficult, so I came back in a hurry. Is that what you? This is what we're supposed to be saying. So it's a kind of paradigm case. When Savitri heard this, then Savitri's heart fell mute. It spoke no word, but holding back her troubled rebel heart, abrupt, erect and strong, calm like a hill, surmounting the seas of mortal ignorance, its peak immutable above mind's air, a power within her answered the still voice. I am thy portion here, charged with thy work. As thou myself, seated forever above, speak to my depths, O great and deathless voice, command, for I am here to do thy will. Now Savitri's real being comes to the front and says, sorry, that was an aberration. Now I am ready to listen to you. What is your command? The voice replied, this is in brief Savitri's yoga. And the voice gives Savitri the path of the yoga she has to traverse. Remember why thou camest. Find out thy soul. Recover thy hid self. In silence seek God's meaning in thy depths. Then mortal nature change to the divine. There are 2 steps. First of all, he says, in silence seek God's meaning in thy depths. Find out thy soul. The first thing we have to do is to find out who we are. When you know who you are, you will know why you are here. See, most of the time, all of us, we want to live a life, we want a life of fulfillment. Whose fulfillment is it? The fulfillment of our outer personality. The outer personality is such a shallow thing that whatever fulfillment you achieve in life, either it doesn't bring you any happiness or brings it only for a short while. You know something is still missing. So, what is it we want to do in this life? Be a successful something. A successful what? You see, most of the time, we want to be something that is regarded in our society as a good thing, as an ideal thing. To talk about it at another level, at one time, being a doctor was a great thing. Everybody wanted to be a doctor. Then came a time when everybody wanted to be an engineer. Every father wanted his son to be an engineer. The son was not even consulted, what do you want to be? You have to be an engineer because this is the age when everybody becomes an engineer. Then now is the time when everybody has to have an MBA. We never ask, do I really want to be an MBA or I would rather be an artist or whatever? Nobody has ever asked this question. You see, in India, the economic compulsions are so strong, and therefore we don't even have the freedom to ask this question. What is it I would like to do in life? Now, if this is one kind of a predicament, even where there are affluent circumstances, you don't reach deep enough within you to ask what is it you want to be. There are various kinds of fashions. I want to be a pop singer. That may be a very popular thing at that time. You want to be a pop singer. There is no harm in being a pop singer provided it is your deepest urge. So most often we don't know what we are supposed to do because we don't know who we are. So the beginning of life, the first thing in life is to find out who we are. And when we find out who we are, then it makes sense. Then we decide this is what I want to be. Or you can say, look, I want to be so and so, but this is a tentative goal. In trying to be so and so, I will also simultaneously try to find out who I am. And when I know who I am, I will change my goal. That's a reasonable thing to do. And therefore, it seems some students here in the ashram school who grew up and were taking leave of the ashram and going out into the world, mother very often used to tell them, the most important thing is to find out who you are. So the psychic being, she would say. It's not just a theoretical concept. That's the primary thing. Once you bring it to the front, then all the guidance is all available right there. So without knowing who we are, there is no point in trying to say I want to be successful in life. That can begin only after we know who we are. And therefore, even for Savitri, even in many, many ways, this question of who we are is very important. For example, I will be brief since I have this note. We all want to help the world. There are many do-gooders in this world. You want to help the world. You want to bring in an era of prosperity. And we all have our little programs, projects. Mother says somewhere she met, it seems, Tolstoy's son somewhere in Japan or someplace. And Tolstoy, being a great writer, his son also had a kink. He wanted human unity. He wanted everybody to come together. And for that, he had one project. What is it? Human unity can be established overnight if everybody decides to wear the same clothes. Let all women wear saris or whatever. Let all men wear whatever they want to wear. By doing this, all humanity will be one. I had a friend, I won't name his name. His pet project is to selling t-shirts. And in the t-shirts you have the symbol, all religions are one. Fantastic idea. But how do you become one? By wearing those t-shirts. We have these little projects of how to help the world, and all our projects, all our attempts are bound to go wrong because we can't understand the world's problems because we are looking at the world's problems through the grid of our own ego. And that is why each one of us has a different solution. Somebody says communism is the answer. Somebody says capitalism is the answer. Somebody says anarchy is the answer. There are various answers given to this question, and each answer is correct because one looks at the world's problems through the grid of one's ego. And only when you get out of this grid of the ego, then real objectivity becomes possible. Nobody who is within the influence of the ego can ever be objective. You just forget about objectivity as long as you are within the realm of the ego. That is why in ancient India, when Dashrath had a problem, he of course went to his financial expert. There are also Dashrath's Reserve Bank, Dashrath's Manmohan Singhs, all these people are available. But whenever a critical moment came, he went to Vasishtha. Vasishtha didn't have a PhD either from Harvard or Stanford or Cambridge. One thing Vasishtha had, what is it? He had found his soul. And because he had found his soul, he would look at any problem in the right perspective, in the objective way, and therefore was able to give the right advice. All the other Manmohan Singhs that he had were not of that stature. They were experts in their own field. But these are all specializations within the domain of the ego. And that is why the first project anybody has to have is to find one's soul. Before you can save the world, make sure you have saved yourself.